Hey, Bob, 1927, Dallas, Texas. Let's go back to when you were just a little boy. What can you remember about life when you were just little?
My mother and dad worked and just played outside all the time. There was no air conditioning at that time.
Yeah. What did your dad do for a living?
He was a violinist, which he loved. When he got married, he had to go to work to make a living, and he worked mostly in pawn shops on Deep M.
Did your mom work in the pawn
She
shop?
worked, no, she worked in the millinery, selling hats downtown. My dad did not own the pawn shop, she just worked there.
Yeah. Now, you were a Depression baby.
Yeah.
Did your folks ever talk about how that affected the family?
Not at all.
Okay. So you weren't even aware that there was a depression?
No, we didn't have anything, and the kids I ran around with, they didn't have anything either, so we didn't know any better.
You remember your grandparents at all?
Yeah, I do.
Tell me about your grandparents.
Well, we lived in a two-story house on Colonial in South Dallas. We lived upstairs, and my grandparents lived downstairs with three of their kids. And my grandfather was from Ireland, grandmother from Russia, and they were more like parents to us, to me.
Yeah. Did they ever tell the stories about how they came here, why they came here?
No, they did not.
Do you know if they left family back behind?
I do not know.
Okay. Now, these were your mom's parents or your dad's parents?
These are my mom's parents.
Okay. And what did your grandfather do?
He was a tailor on Ackerd Street in downtown Dallas, and he worked in a clothing store. Then he had a tailor shop of his own.
Now, what about your grandparents on your mom's side?
Well, my grandfather worked in clothing stores downtown. Then he had a clothing store in Oak Cliff.
Now, do you know where your grandparents from that side came from?
Yeah, my grandfather came from Ireland, and my grandmother from Russia.
And where did your dad's parents come from?
I think they came from Russia, I'm not sure.
Did you live with your grandparents then?
Well, they lived downstairs, we lived upstairs.
Okay, so it was a...
My mother's folks.
Where did you go to grammar school?
Colonial in South Dallas.
Okay. And, when you guys were small, it was in the late 20s and everything. What did you do for fun?
We played ball outside and just hang out at night. There were like 5 or 6 of us. And this is mostly when a young teenager. And none of us had any money, so we didn't know any better, or kids that did have money.
Yeah. Now, there was no TV, obviously, but did you guys listen to radio shows at all?
We listened to radio, mostly on Sunday. Everybody at that time sat on the front porch in the evening, and if Joe Louis was fighting, I could walk down the street. I could hear because everybody had on the radio on the front porch. There were maybe 6 of us together. None of us had any money. None of us smoked. And we never heard of dope or marijuana at all. Probably the worst things we did was steal plums and peaches off the neighbor's yard. But none of us ever got in any trouble. And if you had a fight at school, after school, it was a fist fight. Now they use guns and knives, and none of us ever got in any trouble at all. There was basically no crime. At 12 o'clock at night, you could walk down the alley. The servants' houses were in the back of the main houses, and we would go to the school grounds, be there at night, play games. But it's not like now. You can't walk down the street.
So did you have a regular group of friends you'd play ball with all the time?
That's correct. We played in the summer all day, every day.
And what player were you? Were you Mickey Mantle?
No, not really.
No. You were before Mickey Mantle.
Yeah.
You were Babe Ruth or Lou Gehrig.
Yeah.
Your group of friends, did you stay in contact with them?
Yeah. continually. One friend, it was a couple, we went out with them, and my very best friend lived in Little Rock.
What's his name?
Bill Bushman. He died. He was like a brother to me, which I never had one. Last night I talked to Monroe Mursky. We were in grade school together, and we stayed in touch all these years. I think they had good lives, and the reason is that we had a good life when we were kids.
Now, was your dad in the service?
In the Navy.
In the Navy? Did he serve in World War I?
Yes.
And do you know where he was stationed?
I really don't.
Did he have any stories at all about the war?
No.
Now, when you were a young man, World War II came out.
Yeah.
Do you remember that day when Roosevelt was on the radio?
Yeah.
Pearl Harbor. What were you guys doing?
Just playing ball, nothing in particular.
Did anything change at that time for you guys? Did the war, when it started, affect your family at all?
No, I enlisted when I was 17 in the Navy, so I wouldn't be drafted in the Army.
Right. Okay. Now, where did you go to high school?
Forest High in South Dallas.
Okay, so when you graduate, there was no plans for college at that time, was there? You knew you were going right into the service?
No. When I graduated high school, I went to University of Texas for a semester and a half. In the other half of the semester, in January, I enlisted in the Navy.
And what was the decision to do that? Because you were afraid you'd be drafted?
No, not really. A lot of my friends went, so I felt I should go too.
Okay. Now you're a young kid, you're in the Navy, the war is still going on.
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
I didn't know any better to think anything.
Yeah.
I mean, I just did it, and I didn't think any long term at all.
Right. Now, where did you get stationed?
San Diego, went to boot camp, radio school. I was a radio operator, and I went to San Francisco at a radio station, and I sent out messages into the Pacific Ocean.
From an actual radio station?
Radio, downtown San Francisco. It was tough duty.
So so the radio station, when you were broadcasting, it was only broadcasting to the armed services?
Yes, correct.
Okay, and then what type of messages were you giving them?
Well, just different locations where everybody was stationed, and just so many different things.
So when the war came to an end, did you stay in the service?
No, when I enlisted, I was allowed to enlist for the duration of the war.
That's how.
So when the war's over, I got out. I was in the service 20 months.
And then you came back home to Dallas?
Came back home, and Lois, my wife, future wife, we got married.
Okay, now where did you meet Lois originally?
In school. We graduated at the same time, and when we graduated, we had a date graduation night.
Okay, so you guys were dating. Now, you didn't get married before you went into the service, though.
I was in the service, and then got married afterwards. I got out of the service like in August. We got married in November.
Okay. And then where'd you guys settle down?
In Dallas.
So did you go back to school, or did you go to work?
I did both. I went to SMU on the GI Bill, and I worked at Glazier's wholesale soda water plant. I checked trucks in, and I checked them out, and I worked about 40 hours a week while I was going to SMU.
Now, did you graduate from SMU?
I graduated from SMU in business marketing.
Okay, so then after you graduated, then what did you do?
I went to work for a dress job for a few months, and then I went to work for a commercial metals company, which is a large recycling company. My very best friend was there, and he got me the job there.
Okay.
And I was there 32 years.
Okay, so you made a career of it there.
Yes.
And exactly what did you guys do?
I was cashier. I worked on the scale. I bought scrap from industrial accounts. I was assistant manager to a large scrapyard. Then I became manager for 12 years. And then I was an area manager over 7 scrapyards for 4 years. And then my 2 sons opened up a scrapyard. And when I was at commercial at the scrapyard, they allowed me to train them. Kenny graduated and he went to work for commercial. They allowed me to train him. A year later, Neil, my son, graduated Texas and he went to work for commercial. They allowed me to train him. Kenny went up to Lubbock and Neil went to the home office, and Kenny hated Lubbock. So he came back to Dallas and he wanted to open up a scrapyard. I said, if you do, go where the other scrapyards are, not out in the outskirts somewhere. So they both quit commercial, went to work. They rented an acre and a half for $250 a month. They had no overhead because they were living at home. I didn't charge them rent.
Now, what did your company think of you training your sons and then them going off to become a competitor?
Well, that's usually what happened. People would go to work for commercial as young kids, and their dad had a scrapyard. Said, well, why don't you go with your dad? I can't get along with my dad. They work a couple of years, learn the business, then go to work for their dad. They weren't concerned about it.
Was there an invention that came along in your lifetime that you went, wow, how did we ever get along without that?
No, I was from the old school. Even when the computers came out, I'd write notes, handwritten notes to my son. So I'm not really computer oriented because I never went forward with it.
Well, I know you work with a cell phone now.
Yeah, not very well.
It rang 100 times before we started.
Yeah.
So I know you've somehow modernized.
Yeah, I don't do it very well.
Yeah. What was the happiest time in your life?
Being married. Mostly with our kids. We've done so many things with the kids. I always bought second-hand automobiles. It's all I could afford. And we made 2 trips to California, stayed with our cousins, and we went to New York right after Kennedy was assassinated. And every time we stopped for gas, see those Texas lights, that's a bad place. They want to know if I knew Ruby. So anyway, we stayed with a cousin up there, and whatever we did with our kid.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you, did you know Jack Ruby?
No.
Oh, okay, because I know some other people from Dallas.
I didn't know him at all.
Yeah. What did you think of the Kennedy assassination? Where were you?
I was at work. It was a shock.
Did it affect you at all?
Not really. I just felt bad about it and carried it around maybe for a few days, but it didn't permanently affect me.
What was the first car you ever owned?
Second-hand Chevrolet in it was a 47 Chevrolet, and I bought it from my employers.
Yeah. You remember what you paid for it?
It was probably about $400 or something like that.
Times have changed a little.
Yeah.
Music, movies, the stars. Do you remember any of the stars from days gone by that you and Lois would like to go to a movie to see?
Well, Spencer Tracy, Clark Gable, Lana Turner, Betty Davis. We right now we enjoy watching those old movies.
Who are the musicians you guys liked back then?
Well, there's Harry James, Tommy and Jimmy Dorsey, and Glenn Miller. Mostly Glenn Miller tunes.
Yeah. Now you have the 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl, and your daughter was the oldest one?
Yes.
Now, she's not in the family business, is she?
No.
10 grandkids, 13 great-grandkids,
Yeah.
and 2 great-grandkids on the way.
Right.
How's those family gatherings?
Well, I'm taking 24 of us to Las Vegas February the 5th. We get together, birthdays, anniversary. We're a very close family, and we all get along.
So how do you do a name count, a check-off list to make sure you got everybody?
I always ask Lois, what's her name, what's his name?
World War II, was there something from World War II that you never told anybody about in the family?
I didn't keep anything from them. There's really nothing, just I told them about my time in the Navy, and I didn't have a tough time about it.
Yeah. Is there any story at all from the Navy you could share? I mean, you're a young kid, you know a war is going on, and
I can tell you that I didn't even shave at that time, and at that time they rationed cigarettes. You could buy so many a week, and I didn't smoke, so everybody was my friend. At boot camp, I remember this one incident. The sergeant in charge said, everybody that went to college take one step forward. And then he said, everybody took one step forward, pick up the cigarette butts.
That's great. Now, in your lifetime, you've lived through so many momentous occasions, of course. The Great Depression when you were a young lad, Vietnam War, Martin Luther King assassination, President Kennedy assassination, the moon landing, something good in '69 for the first time. And of course, the tragedy of 9/11. Was there something on the national scene that really stood out in your mind that really affected you at all?
When these things came about, I felt real bad about them, but none of them really affected me.
When people first came out, what was your favorite show?
Sunday evenings like Jack Benny or Milton Berle. I like to see Frank Sinatra.
Well, you and Lois got married in 1946.
Yeah.
3 kids we mentioned, 1 girl, 2 boys, 10 grandkids, 3 great-grandkids, and 2 great-grandkids on the way?
Yeah.
And those are twins.
Oh, we had the twins.
Oh, you have twins.
They're part of the 13.
And you have 2 more on the way.
Yeah.
What advice does great-granddad have for the next generation?
Well, I would say this. Parents should spend more time with their kids when they're young. I know I had friends that their kids were maybe 16 or 17, and they said, Bob, I can't do this with my kid. I can't get along or whatever. You need to start when they were 4 and 5. Spend time at the Jewish Community Center. I was a football coach, baseball coach, basketball coach. And my 2 kids were real good basketball players. And I'd have them on my team, and I would coach in every sport they had here. And I enjoyed it. And I think that's the reason we get along so well. People get spoiled. When you have money when you're young and have money when you're old, you can't appreciate it. But if you don't have money, then you have money, you can appreciate it. And married couples should start spending time with their kids when they're young. I know when I was in South Dallas, the houses were real close together. There was no air conditioning. And you move from one side of the bed to the other when you're sweating, sleeping. And we played ball all day. And I think now these kids with their computers, they're going to miss all that. They're going to play their computer all day instead of being out playing with the other kids. And I really think that this generation is going to miss that. And the other thing is, with no air conditioning, we didn't know any better. And if you or I didn't have air conditioning for 2 days in a row, we might get very ill, maybe die. You couldn't stand it. But we didn't know any better, and we had a good life, and that's the reason that I know we had a good life.
And what was that day like when you got air conditioning put in the home?
Well, it was a luxury. And a luxury eventually becomes a necessity once you have it. So it was very nice.
What other involvement did you and Lois have with the Jewish community?
Well, I was on the board here at the Jewish Community Center. All our friends were Jewish couples. We went out together, and
Well, thanks for doing this today.
I enjoyed it.